Gentlemen, thank you very much both for your time. Perhaps to start with you, Mr. Advocate Hoffman. You know, this matter around the suspension of Matthews almost for some reason fell off the radar with everything around municipalities, but everybody would agree it's very important. What do you make of the suspension itself and the whole dual citizenship argument? Because this is a man who has worked at several parastatals without this cropping up.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, and good afternoon to your listeners. Good afternoon to Jack as well. It's a very mysterious development. I find the dual British passport, the dual citizenship, the British passport that Mr. Matthews happens to hold, could hardly have been unknown in the public domain, because he is a member of a very well-known ANC-linked family. One of his sister is a cabinet minister and has been for many years. And as you said in the intro, he's also worked for the state in the past. So it seems to me that the materiality of his British citizenship is highly questionable, and that this is simply being used as an excuse to sideline him, currently by way of gardening leave, or what is technically called a precautionary suspension, and in due course wearing him out, as the system tends to do, persuading him either with money or without it to leave the passenger rail administration. The other aspect, which has been announced by Leonard Ramatlakane, who is also a long-standing member of the ANC. He did have a brief flirtation with Cope, but he returned to the ANC in 2014. And he says that there are contractual obligations involved in this dispute, but he doesn't say what they are. The minister is also remaining silent on the topic, so it is really mysterious. It's almost like an invitation to speculation, and one can speculate that this is simply a falling out between members of different factions,
which is what many are alluding to. It's what many have alluded to, Advocate Hoffman. Perhaps to bring Jack in, do you think that it is somewhat of a fallout between the minister and the board over non-performance? Because we know that many, or at least there have been reports that surfaced that they wanted to nail him on this. But then we also know that some of the issues at Prasa predate his employment. But listening to the minister yesterday, we heard somehow of the issues around the 742 million wasteful expenditure. And then some are saying that perhaps that was the real issue here, that it is the wasteful expenditure, and possibly that the minister and the board knew of this, and unfortunately they used the dual citizenship issue.
No, thank you very much for having us, Satawu. Let me also greet my colleague, Advocate Hoffman. Before I respond to your question, I just want to correct. I'm a Satawu General Secretary. I think let me come to the question that you have raised. From our side, we think the minister, after Mr. Zolani Matthews was appointed, the board was also appointed. And we need to look at the responsibility and the fiduciary duties of the board. It is to make sure that the company is running in line with the good government policies. And then we are not that much worried that the board have finally picked up that the appointment of Mr. Zolani Matthews and the security breaches that were never disclosed. We think it is within the powers of the board to do thorough research and thorough investigations to everyone employed by the company. But we also want to bring another aspect that we've seen it has been a trend in Prasa. You'll recall that previously, the minister have appointed Mr. Mpondo as administrator. At a later stage, the court have nullified that appointment. But we do understand at that time, the Prasa did not have a board. So the position of Satawu is that we do commend the board for executing their fiduciary duties and making sure that everyone will be held accountable in future. And We think it will be proper if we give the board chance to investigate, and then up until they come up with the finding of their investigations. We don't believe that there is a political intervention. And then we respect what the minister said yesterday when he was saying he doesn't want to interfere in the internal processes of Prasa because there is a board that has been established to deal with those issues.
And then as Satawu, I don't know if you missed this matter. It's the matter around Mr. Matthews and the Red Ants. We know that they were currently in court. The Red Ants have taken Prasa, in fact, to court for non-payment of an amount of 248 million that's owed to them for 20 days' worth of work during the July unrest. They were contracted to protect Prasa's dilapidated infrastructure, and I repeat, dilapidated infrastructure, at 248 million for 20 days, providing 5,200 guards. I don't know, perhaps you can enlighten us as a union. When we speak of grading, and we're talking here about security guards, be it grade C, A, or B, how much does it cost for the most expensive security guard to guard any infrastructure per day?
We are aware about the issue. That issue did not escape us, and we think that that appointment happened in KwaZulu-Natal. And if you look at one of the reasons that Mr. Zolani Matthews suspended for, it also includes security breaches. In our view is that we need to allow the process to unfold because it's still under precautionary suspension. But if we were to speculate, we think it was wrong for him to appoint the security company without following a due process. And the amount that the Red Ants have charged, it's so unreasonable. No one can charge that amount for guarding the dilapidated properties, as you have said, for 20 days. It's a matter for concern for us, but we respect the internal processes to unfold within Prasa. We will comment after everything has been investigated.
And then, Advocate Hoffman, I know you have felt strongly that this is somewhat of a purge. You're calling it a garden suspension or garden leave. But being aware of what has happened now with this 248 million that surprised many, what is your take? Could there be legitimate reasons here around his suspension?
Look, it depends on who it is that made the decision to contract with the Red Ants and whether the earlier irregular expenditure is something that Mr. Matthews has been trying to clean up. And at this stage, as Jack has said, we're in the realms of speculation. I think we do need to allow the process to unfold, but we must also be astute to see to it that the process is not allowed to drag and that the process is not used as a method of easing Mr. Matthews out of the system. At this stage, I am totally agnostic as to whether he is a good guy or a bad guy. It could be either way, and it is something that needs to be properly investigated. The board says that it is going to get on with disciplinary inquiry, and that process must unfold as quickly as possible. Mr. Matthews' own attorney, Peter Harris, is on public record to say that he doesn't believe that his client has done anything wrong. Well, clearly, Mr. Ramatlakane, the chairman of Prasa, does think that there's some wrongdoing, some contractual obligations that are questionable. That must be ventilated without delay and without keeping the public guessing, because after all, the rail agency is in a complete mess and does require a lot of intensive care at this stage.
What does it really say about the minister here? Because many of us would remember that he was full of praise when some criticized this appointment for several reasons. He was full of praise, saying this is the new era for Prasa, and then we find out it's only now, 8 months later, that you established the dual citizenship issue. I know both of you don't really think it's something that was only established now. It's always been known, given that they are a prominent family. But what does it say about the minister and their ability to even do thorough research on who they place at the helm of such an important institution? Because really there's quite a lot, even if you just do a simple Google search on Zolani Matthews as opposed to Zolani Matthews. There's quite a lot of allegations around what happened in the US and the senator there. So what does it really say about the minister and the individuals that they place at the helm of some of these institutions?
From our side, as Satawu, I think it says a lot about the minister. At the same time, we think when you employ someone in this position of Mr. Zolani Matthews, there are processes that need to be followed. The check and balances must be made. We are not sure as to whether did the minister do those, but what we know is that Mr. Zolani Matthews have applied for the job and submitted his CV, showing his qualification and his expertise. Then that's why we are saying we were waiting patiently for this matter to be finalized so that we'll be able to be critiqued, either be it to the minister or be it to Mr. Zolani Matthews himself. For now, we are still speculating, to be quite honest. We might miss the point here. But we have made a caution to the board and to the minister in the letter that we've written to them that they need to expedite the process, and they must make sure that this process, again, is not going to be is not going to involve another legal expenses that will affect the company negatively.
Nor should it be riddled in secrecy, because we're all speculating at this point, and that's why we have you two gentlemen. But perhaps to close here with Satawu, lastly, on Prasa suspended head of legal services, Martha Ngoyi, what exactly are we missing here about Martha as a whistleblower? Because yes, we know Prasa's rules stipulated that any contract above 100 million requires the board's approval. She approved an extension of 58 million. But the total of that contract, we also are aware, was now in excess of 100 million. And many would assume that clearly this is an issue of interpretation. But we have Prasa now suing her for 45 million when she actually won 45 million for Prasa in court. What is the situation here as a union? What do you make of it?
Our take as Satawu is that, to be quite honest, we all agree that we are dealing with one of the state-owned company that is in a dire situation. Everyone that got appointed there does not last. Prasa hasn't have a CEO for the past 10 years. Everyone that got suspended. We are very much worried about that, to say really there is no proper rules of governance that have been followed, and that we can put squarely to the office of the minister, because as a main shareholder, he must make sure that those that have been deployed there, they comply with the provisions of the law.
No, thank you very much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. That's Advocate Paul Hoffman, as well as Jack Mazibuko from Satawu, speaking to us on that all-important matter that almost somehow missed our radar when we were all discussing all about elections and municipalities, but certainly with a broader conversation still. And hopefully we'll see a lot of transparency from government on this particular matter.